Thank you for joining us for another episode of God, Law, and Liberty with David Fowler, President of the Family Action Council of Tennessee. Every week, we are putting culture, politics, and law on a collision course with the truth of God's Word. And now, here's David.
Thank you for joining me for today's episode of God, Law, and Liberty. And as always, I'm just delighted to have you with me. And before I get into the show, let me remind you, those of you who are parents who have children between the ages of 14 and 18, that the Ezra Institute is holding a week-long worldview camp in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, in July. And if you'd like more information about that camp, let me encourage you to go to EzraInstitute.com and you can find more information about the program. Now today, what I want us to focus on is something Al Mohler was reported as having said this week about the upcoming November election. And what he said, I think it is vitally important for Christians who care about law, civil government, and politics to think through. Because if we get what he's talking about wrong, I don't think we'll ever understand why our elections never seem to change anything. So if you have friends who are struggling with politics and wonder why the laws we enact increasingly seem to give way to just more evil, that it just keeps moving in one direction, then if you find today's episode helpful, please consider sharing it with your friends. We don't have an advertising budget, so your word of mouth is the only way the things talked about on here will reach other people. So now, with that little self-promotion, let me get on to the show and what Dr. Mohler said this week. I don't personally know Dr. Mohler, but his credentials within the Christian community are certainly strong. He's the president of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary, which is one of the largest seminaries in the world. Time magazine has called him the reigning intellectual of the evangelical movement in the U.S. He hosts two podcasts, The Briefing, a daily analysis of news and events from a Christian worldview, and Thinking in Public, which is a series of conversation with the day's leading thinkers. So by looking at what he's reported as saying and trying to perhaps put it in perspective, I'm not meaning to take away from any of that, discount his leadership position within evangelicalism, or put at issue the shared faith we have in the doctrines of grace that are in Jesus Christ. And in fact, until probably a year or two ago, I might have said exactly the same thing as he was reported as saying in the print media. And one other just little caveat, because the print media gave no other context other than the reporter saying his remarks also touched on the IVF resolution before the Southern Baptist Convention and on Trump's conviction, I may be taking his comment for something more than he meant to say, but still, the comment itself, abstracted from the person, still deserves a closer examination. So here's what the article says, and I'm quoting it. Mohler didn't outright endorse Trump, but said the stakes of the election in November are, quote, two rival understandings of reality facing off, end quote. One of those, specifically that of the GOP, is more aligned with Southern Baptist values, Mohler noted. So there's the statement. Let me just read it again. Quote, Mohler didn't outright endorse Trump, but said the stakes of the election in November are two rival understandings of reality facing off. One of those, specifically that of the GOP, is more aligned with Southern Baptists' values, Mohler noted. Now, there's no doubt that on the matter of abortion regulations and the imposition of transgender-related mandates, the positions of the two parties are different. And it's true, the GOP positions on those matters are more aligned with that of most Southern Baptists. And perhaps Republicans are more tolerant about permitting civil and public conduct informed by religious conviction to escape punishment, such as has happened in other states with Christian cake bakers and florists. And perhaps the Republicans are more tolerant of Christian values in other voluntary economic relations and exchanges as well. But in no way can I say that the Democratic and Republican parties are, and here I'm quoting what Mohler was quoted as saying, two rival understandings of reality facing off. They are not different understandings of reality, and here's what I mean. First, neither party believes there is a real thing, even though incorporeal, called law that provides real, enduring, legal limitations on human nature, which means there are also enduring legal limitations on what we are for. But neither party really believes in any enduring legal limitations on what it means to be human. They don't even believe in that regarding the nature of the family and what it's for, or the nature of civil government and what it's for, or at an even more base level, the nature of the legislative power and what it's for. Both parties are the same in that neither has an understanding of the nature of law as presented in the Bible, but believe we create law. Because if either party held to the understanding that law has a real, objective reality and is not merely positivized or created by man, then that party would affirm that in every respect, male and female is about more than biological differences, fairness of competition or economic opportunity, and they wouldn't rely strictly on the physical complementariness of male and female. If you don't know what I mean there about the physical complementariness of male and female being a shallow understanding of what it means to be human, then let me suggest to you Dorothy Sayers' little book. It was a speech given in 1938 called Are Women Human? Anyway, let me move on. If either party held to the understanding that law has a real, objective reality, then that party would affirm that human beings are, in principle, procreative beings, even if some of them are not, in fact, able to procreate. And from these two legal affirmations about what it means to be human and what we're for, at least the party who ascribes to those affirmations would know that abortion and medical practices directed to so-called gender transitions, they're already unlawful because in violation of the law by which our being is constituted and defined, and the law pertaining to what male and female are for. And that neither party is willing to say that, it just means to me they share the same understanding of reality, which means they are not in principle rivals, as Mohler said, but they're only rivals in the measure of degree and the number of instances in which they're willing to deny to law any reality. Moreover, if those parties believed there is a real thing, even though incorporeal, called law, that provides real, enduring, legal limitations on human nature and what we are for, then that party would not be turning to medical doctors, scientists, sociologists, and psychologists for answers to questions about abortion and so-called transgenderism, because they would know that both of those questions present real legal questions, questions of real ethics based on objective realities that are not to be manipulated, particularly for the sake of power over law, which in God's universe is actually always over them, which is what the rule of law means. And to the extent that they think they have a power over law, then the Bible would say they are ignorant and foolish, and God will break them with a rod of iron and shatter them like a potter's vessel, Psalm 2:8. And in essence, the law will never be under them for long, because the rule of law is a real thing. And if either of those parties believed that law was a real thing, even though incorporeal, and law provided real, enduring legal limitations on human nature, which informs what we're for, then the party that believed that would not continue to acquiesce to the U.S. Supreme Court's 2015 decision in Obergefell versus Hodges that held the marital relationship cannot be lawfully defined in terms of man and woman. But the reality is, both parties have made peace with this lawless understanding of the lawful nature of reality. Again, if either party understood that these incorporeal realities are part of the nature of the cosmos, in addition to that which is merely physical, well, then that party would know that breaking or violating the legal nature of the cosmos brings disaster and death of both persons and culture. And that party would be working as hard as it could to communicate this to those they represent, what I think a real statesman would be doing in our situation. Or at a minimum, they would at least articulate and defend the existence of a real legal order that already makes abortion, gender mutilation, same-sex unions unlawful. And they would know that there's a God-given law regarding the nature of their office, which means that their job is simply to conform civil or enacted law to the law and legal structure of reality that already exists. But both parties think that their authority comes from whatever coercive power they can attain to, and that law is that coercive power, and it's that power and those laws that make and shape and form society. So that means they are rivals for coercive authority, but their understanding of reality, it's exactly the same. In that regard, they're not rivals at all. But we don't have these kinds of persons in public office speaking this way. And to be honest, I suspect many Christians would be either uncomfortable or put off if they did. And the reason I say that is I don't think most Christians even present a rival understanding of reality to that of the two major parties. And here's why I say that. First, we pass off as Christian statesmanship training programs for elected office that really don't do anything more than put certain ethical ideas of right and wrong in the context of Christian connotation words, like law, that no longer have a metaphysical reality that the Bible gives to law. And second, few pastors that I know refuse to administer state licensing schemes that are now predicated on an androgynous anthropology, which is effectively transgenderism. So when a pastor submits to the reigning understanding of the nature of marriage, that men and women are interchangeable parts, in principle, that pastor's already accepted and is willing to administer an androgynous understanding of human nature. But few pastors will speak in their church, let alone in public forums, in this kind of way. And I suspect, to be honest, many couldn't. But if they do know what I'm saying, as a practical matter, they don't present to their congregations an understanding of reality that's a rival to what the two major political parties embrace, or if they say they do, they don't make it as clear as I'm making it now, because you see, that's politics. And they have bifurcated reality, which is just as bad, and it's a dualism that is contrary to all that the Bible teaches. In fact, and may I be so bold to say this, the church can't present a rival understanding of reality to that of the two major parties if its leaders are telling them the two parties have rival understandings of reality. Because that statement itself means that pastor's understanding of reality isn't biblically sound either. I mean, here's sort of my point. The fact that one party's rivalry with God is not as objectively apparent and as in your face as the other, or let me put it maybe in biblical terminology that'll make more sense. The fact that one party's enmity against God is more objectively apparent and in your face than the other doesn't mean they're rivals. Both are fundamentally at odds with God's legal order. And if we don't see that, then our thinking is also fundamentally at odds with God's legal order, too. Now, in case you're wondering what I mean by there being a lawful nature to reality, or what I mean by describing law as having, in essence, some kind of quality of being, even though it's incorporeal, what I'm talking about here is metaphysics, which is an indispensable part of a Christian's cosmology. And our cosmology is our understanding of the nature of the cosmos and what it's for. I've never run this statement by anybody, but if we don't believe in metaphysics, that there is a reality beyond the physical, then we can't even believe in God. Which, I believe, explains why he was so good to take on human flesh so that the glory of God could be revealed to us, as it says in 2 Corinthians 4, in a way that we could then know God. So metaphysics is simply the belief that there's an objective reality that goes beyond the physical, that can be empirically measured by touch, taste, sight, feel, things like that. And biblically speaking, law is a metaphysical reality. And that we have trouble thinking of law as real and objective and not just an ethical idea or ethical ideal is, I think, a telltale sign of how much evolution has infected our thinking. You see, evolution eliminates anything beyond the material physical universe except, and here's evolution's Achilles heel, which we need to understand and we need to learn how to tear down, except natural laws, such as gravity, that by their very nature are said to have some kind of life or energy or power to shape things into what they are. You see, so the stream runs this direction rather than some other direction because of laws pertaining to erosion and climate and all kinds of other things, and that's what those laws of nature shape the direction of the river. Okay, but that's really a bunch of bluster and falderall to hide the fact that if these so-called laws are real, they are incorporeal. Well, then they're going to have some difficulty explaining why there can't be a law of human nature that pertains to what a human being is and what he's for, right? Now, I'm going to tell you that the scientists have attempted to even get past the idea of these natural laws as laws to eliminate the concept of real law altogether. But I'm already 20 minutes into today's podcast, and it's a little too late to start in on explaining how scientists have tried to eliminate all concept of law, and perhaps I'll get to that next week. So anyway, I'll wrap up today's show here, but we need to begin thinking in terms of law as having a reality. We need to begin thinking in terms of metaphysical realities again, and not law as some ideal or something that is out there that doesn't touch down in the real world until the legislature creates a statute. If that's what we're thinking, and I will tell you many legislators think that way, then we are not thinking biblically, and law vanishes. Well, again, thanks for joining me for today. Look forward to being with you again next week on the next episode of God, Law, and Liberty.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your friends to subscribe too. God, Law, and Liberty is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information, please visit us at www.facttennessee.org. That's factennessee.org. And please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Fact Tennessee.